Thank you. Hello? Okay. We will be starting in 2 minutes. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Bom dia, buenos días. Bienvenidos, and welcome to the 2019 Department of Energy Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. My name is Mauricio Paredes from the Loan Programs Office, and I will serve as your Master of Ceremony for today's program. So much of our culture is about making connections. Whether you're among family, at your favorite coffee shop, or simply just here with your colleagues. Please take a moment to introduce yourself to someone new or standing near you. You can stand up. Obrigado. Gracias. Thank you. Thank you. President Lyndon Johnson first proclaimed the celebration of Hispanic Heritage Week in 1968. This was expanded by legislation to cover a full month and was enacted into law in 1988 by President Ronald Reagan. This month, we honor Latinos and Hispanic Americans for their countless contributions to our great nation. On behalf of the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity and the Community for the Advancement of Latinos at the Department of Energy, CALDOE, we welcome you and thank you for joining us. We have an exciting program planned for you, including future remarks from honorable and distinguished members of our community, along with musical performances, electrifying musical performances, from a talented Kurdish American singer, songwriter, and producer, Siva Omar, who I understand speaks more than 5 languages, and will be performing in Spanish for us. I would like to invite Ms. Patrice Carthorne of the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity as she sings the National Anthem, accompanied by the Armed Forces Color Guard.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched was so gallantly streaming. And the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Hold, right shoulder, home. Hold, turn, home. Hut, 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 hut.
Thank you, Patrice. It is my distinct honor now to introduce my boss, the Honorable James E. Campos. Mr. Campos was nominated by President Trump and confirmed by the United States Senate on April 9, 2018, to serve as the Director, Office of Minority Economic Impact. In addition to this Senate-confirmed position, Mr. Campos serves the agency in multiple other roles: as Director, Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, as the Equal Employment Opportunity Director for the enterprise, and as the agency's Chief Diversity Office. In his various roles, Director Campos is tasked with implementing legislation and executive orders with an eye toward their effect on minorities and minority businesses, as well as ensuring that minorities are afforded an opportunity to participate fully in the department's programs. In addition, he is charged with enforcing the anti-discrimination statutes for the Department of Energy's internal and external stakeholders and fostering an inclusive work environment where diversity of thought, race, gender, and other attributes are valued and leveraged to achieve the Department of Energy's mission. Mr. Campos serves as the agency's designee on several White House interagency initiatives, including the initiatives on educational excellence for Hispanics, the Pacific Asian Islander, the initiative to promote excellence and innovation at historically Black colleges and universities. Lastly, Mr. Campos is the department's designee on the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council and the Council on Eliminating Barriers to Affordable Housing Development. Prior to his presidential appointment, Mr. Campos was the senior advisor on economic development and strategic planning and government affairs to the college president of Nevada State College, where he was involved in the areas of government and community relations, strategic business consulting, and business development. Mr. Campos held several statewide gubernatorial appointments in the state of Nevada, including the Equal Rights Commission, the Governor's Workforce Investment Sector Councils on Gaming, Tourism, and Entertaining, Minings and Minerals, the Governor's Office of Economic Development International Trade Council, and the Nevada Taxi Cab Authority Commission. He was formerly the commissioner of the Nevada Consumer Affairs Division, where he regulated 7 industries and enforced state laws governing deceptive trade practices. Mr. Campos holds both the Bachelor of Arts and a Master of Science degrees from the University of Maryland, a Master of Business Administration from the University of Glasgow, Scotland, and an Executive Program Certificate from Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business in Washington, D.C. Please welcome to the podium the Honorable James E. Campos.
Thank you, Ann, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here. This is my second time being able to participate in this great event, so it is truly an honor, and it's wonderful to see so many people that I know and so many that I don't know. So, this year's theme, A History of Serving Our Nation, speaks to the many contributions Hispanics have made to our society. And this annual observance provides an opportunity for the Department of Energy to acknowledge the vibrant culture of America's largest ethnic minority. Since joining the department in 2018, I have seen firsthand the contributions that Hispanics have made to the department's mission. The contributions of Hispanics here at the department and around the country and the world are immense. Hispanic Americans are thriving in today's booming economy as they continue to see more and more new jobs, higher incomes, and opportunities to grow. The Hispanic community is a rising force in the American economy. In fact, the fastest growing segment among American small businesses are Hispanic-owned enterprises. That's why we at the Department of Energy have taken a number of steps to see that more minority and small businesses engage with the DOE, and I work with minority-serving institutions to encourage students to enter STEM fields, which is truly vital. As I've spoken across different venues across America, the importance of minorities, Hispanics to enter the STEM fields. It's vital for our country, it's vital for our future, and it's something that we have to really take seriously to move forward. To address these opportunities head on, and to further the mission of my office, I have launched the Equity and Energy Initiative to support the nation's energy goals by fostering entrepreneurship, innovation, and workforce partnerships for diverse communities in high-growth energy sectors and DOE programs and research opportunities. In order to maintain energy independence and economic prosperity, we must embrace the urgent need to prepare our workforce in the next decade as the demographic changes move forward. Equity and Energy's central theme focuses on the importance of increasing the interest and access to the energy economy for individuals in underserved communities. This initiative aims on accomplishing this through its pillars. 1, workforce development. 2, STEM enhancement. 3, supplier diversity. 4, technical assistance. 5, energy sustainability. Additionally, this initiative will focus on technology and artificial intelligence, entrepreneurship, and workforce readiness for formerly incarcerated persons, and opportunity zones. Equity and Energy is working to create a more diverse and inclusive energy economy through outreach activities to minority-serving educational institutions and minority chambers of commerce, and encouraging potential workers to enter the energy workforce. It's vital that we have initiatives like this at the Department of Energy. Equity and Energy is for all the particular offices throughout the department. It is something that's important because of what's happening in our country, the character change, and the immediate need for more minorities to enter into STEM. Not just matriculate, but also to achieve that certificate, that degree, that competence. It's vital for our country, for tomorrow, and for later on for our grandchildren. So I'm very bullish on this department. I'm very bullish on our country and our ability to achieve this. But we have to take this seriously and put the pedal to the floor, as a friend of mine just mentioned earlier. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce another good friend of mine, Ruben Barrales. Ruben is a Senior Vice President of External Relations, Government Relations, and Public Policy in Wells Fargo. Prior to his current position, he served as Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs and Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States, and served as President and CEO of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce and joint venture, Silicon Valley Network. More recently, he held a position in a nonprofit groups focused on appointing and electing Latino and Latina candidates to state and local government offices. Ruben was the first elected Latino to the San Mateo County, California Board of Supervisors, and was recognized as one of the 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States by Hispanic Business Magazine. It's an honor to have been your friend, Ruben, for many years. We've had many great conversations. I know how much you do for the Hispanic community. You're valued. I appreciate you being here today. I'd like to welcome you on stage. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Wow, thank you, James. I appreciate the invitation to be here. Department of Energy. Is there a lot of energy in the room? Oh, yeah. Great. Thank you, James, so much. And I want to thank the team at the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity and the members of the Department of Energy for your service to our nation and what you do to keep us moving. So I'm going to be brief because I know we got a lot of people speaking this morning. I don't know why I was selected because my story isn't really unique in the Hispanic community, but I'll tell it anyways. And when people meet me, usually if they don't know me, they don't think I'm Hispanic. That's not usually something that they think because I don't fit into I guess the mold. And I guess my main point is that the Hispanic community is very diverse. We are very diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, religion. It's so much diversity within the Hispanic community, and I appreciate that more now, especially being on the East Coast. I grew up on the West Coast where Hispanic meant Mexicano. Because overwhelmingly on the West Coast in California, most Hispanics happen to be of Mexican descent, but that is changing as well. And then obviously in other parts of the country, we see quite a bit of diversity throughout the Hispanic community. So as my story is not really unique, my parents were Mexican. My dad grew up on a small ranch outside of Mexico City in the state of Mexico. My mom was a city girl in Mexico City. My father grew up very poor on that ranch. He tells me the story that when the first day he shaved as a young man, he actually cried because he realized that his childhood was over and that now he was expected to be a man and to support the family and the like. And he did. He went into the city, he got odd jobs, he drove buses, he did whatever he could to make a living. He didn't have anything other than the equivalent of what would be a third grade education. And he had an opportunity, this was in the early 50s, to come as part of the Bracero program. Some of you might be familiar with the Bracero program, temporary work program. So he came as part of that to the U.S. On the West Coast, and he absolutely fell in love with this country, with the beauty and the opportunity that America provided, which he didn't feel he had. He didn't have that economic opportunity and the freedom back home. So he worked in that program. He was able to make a little bit of money. As the story goes in our household, he bought a brand new Chevy, drove it back down to Mexico City, fell in love with a very young Mexican girl in Mexico City. They got married and they took that Chevy straight up back through Tijuana and San Diego and all the way up to the San Francisco Bay Area. He thought San Francisco was probably the most beautiful city he had ever seen. And if you could imagine, in the late 50s at that time. My mom, she was able to go through what was the equivalent of high school back in Mexico. But she basically, my dad was a manual laborer. He learned a trade eventually, which was to be a roofer, which if you're a son of a roofer, that's not the most exciting thing, to be able to mop hot tar and nail shingles every summer and on the weekends. My mom was cleaning houses, and I remember my parents thought education was very important, and so they sent me to Catholic school. So they scraped up enough to send me to Catholic school as a young man. I had started out in public school, but that's another story in terms of some of the trouble we got into. We don't have enough time here for that. But my mom would clean houses. And I remember one time I was at school, and a colleague of mine said, "Wow, your mom came and cleaned our house." And my mom said she was the best house cleaner we've ever had, which made me feel so embarrassed and so proud at the same time. That my mom was, cleaning, a classmate's house, but again, that work ethic that we had, that nothing was more important than to know that she stood out. My dad too, he would work for a roofing company, put in his 8 squares, if you're familiar with that, 800 square feet, and then he'd go before the end of the day and start with another company and nail some more shingles, and just worked hard. Back then, if you were familiar with the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, before it was Silicon Valley, it was the Valley of Heart's Delight. And there were orchards and fields and canning factories all over that area. So my mom ended up working in one of those canning factories. And then eventually she opened up a small coffee shop in our neighborhood. And And she finally became a citizen, which she really hadn't seen a need to do for some time. As I mentioned, I spent my summers and weekends nailing shingles, mopping hot tar, and then being able to wash dishes. So I didn't appreciate it at the time, but obviously it gave me a strong work ethic. As a young Mexican boy in a neighborhood that was changing, again, wanting to fit in, it didn't help that my parents didn't speak English as their first language. Didn't help that the smells from our kitchen were different than everybody else's in the neighborhood. And I remember in the first grade, we got a knock at the door, and my teacher was at our front door. And that was very much out of context. She came in, of course, my parents hosted her, and basically her point was that my parents needed to start speaking English to us at home, so that my brother and I, and then eventually my younger sister, would have more opportunity from her perspective. And overnight, from that day forward, my parents, in their broken English, would speak English at home, and we, again, as the kids, would run circles around them in terms of what we would say and what we'd get away with, unless, of course, they had an English-speaking friend who was over, and then we'd get in trouble. Long story short, I was the first in my family to go to college. I went away to college because, of course, I wanted to get as far away as possible. If those of you are familiar with the geography of California, I wanted to get to the beach in Southern California, so I went to UC Riverside, which obviously I wasn't strong in geography because it's nowhere near the beach, but there is a lot of sand around it, so kind of high desert. But it was great, and I never thought of anything other than just going home after college and working in the family business. And my dad was, again, the roofer, and my mom with the coffee shop. Never entered my mind that I could actually have a career separate from my family. So I came home, worked with my father in doing roofing, and it's kind of bragging, but I think I have to say I was probably the best educated roofer on the San Francisco Peninsula for a while there. And I got involved in a lot of community efforts in a growing Hispanic community in my neighborhood. I decided to run for county supervisor in San Mateo County. I was walking door to door. Some of you have been involved in campaigns. It's not a political event, I know, but you have to move quickly. So I was talking with this Mexican-American woman, saying, soy Ruben Barrales, soy corriendo por supervisor. And she would say, no sé si puedo votar para ti, eres muy joven. She said, I don't know if I can vote for you. You're very young. And eventually I had to say, look, Mom, I need your vote. So I think she voted for me because I got 50.1% of the vote in that election, barely won. And I've had some great opportunities, and not the least of which I know is they're because of the connections I made in the Latino community, the Hispanic community, folks that have helped me, activists who were in my community who wanted to see us as a people prosper and move forward. And I feel like that's my responsibility too. And as James mentioned, I had the opportunity to work in the White House for President George W. Bush. And I remember I brought my mom out to visit us here, and we were going to all the monuments, and we were at the Vietnam Memorial. And my mom, again, she came here as a teenage bride, learned English. We're looking at the wall, and the first thing she said to me is, look at all of the Hispanic names on the wall. And to her, it resonated. She connected with that. We have no military background in our family, but that connected with her. And I think that's important. I think the work that James and the team is doing in terms of diversity and inclusion is so important. We need to bring more, not just Hispanics, we need to bring in more people of color. We need to bring in more diversity into organizations like the Department of Energy and others so that we can create opportunities for a future generation. And speaking of future generations, I'm going to wrap it up because I'm going on too long, but I know the point's been made, but I want to emphasize, and this is, again, not bragging about the Hispanic community, if you will, but Hispanics are the future of this country. That right now, 1 million Latinos are born every year in the USA. And by 2045, non-Hispanic whites will make up less than 50% of the population. In other words, our population, we are becoming more and more diverse. And when you look at millennials, Hispanics are a disproportionate share of millennials. So in that regard, it's not rhetorical to say that Hispanics are the future of this country. And we obviously need to make the investment. In terms of our workforce, we all understand there's an aging workforce. Don't mean to point out anybody in this room, but we need a new generation, a new workforce, and we need to make sure that they're equipped and ready to serve. And so I'm so proud to play a role. Now I'm at this bank called Wells Fargo, which is the largest lender to Hispanic homeowners. There's so much that I'm proud of what Wells does, but the Department of Energy does so much as well. Department of Energy, in terms of jobs you create, not just at the department, but jobs in the energy industry, and what the end product is. Energy makes America thrive, makes the world move forward, and creates progress. And I'm proud we've got leaders like Cindy Benvenides here from LULAC, the longest, the oldest civil rights organization for Latinos in the country, fighting the good fight, because civil rights never are settled. You have to keep fighting for them. And folks like, and I'm going to call out a friend of mine, Jose Fuentes here, who's been involved in Puerto Rico, who's been an advocate for Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans on the island and in the USA. There's so much we can do. When I was working at the White House, and I would travel quite a bit, and I was delighted to go to states at the time that didn't seem very Hispanic, in South Carolina, in Nebraska, throughout the country, and find pockets of Hispanics, and I would feel at home wherever I went to these small pockets. These pockets are growing now, and again, as I said, Hispanics are the future of this country, and I'm so proud that the Department of Energy recognizes that, and that you're doing all you can to help get our young people into STEM and to become part of the solution moving forward. Thank you very much for having me here today. I really look forward to the program, and I look forward to the food. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrales, for your kind remarks. And you're right. We are a very diverse community. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to some of your stories. It is now time for our special performance from Ms. Siva. Siva made history as the first Kurdish singer on American Idol. She received 3 yeses from iconic celebrity judges and made it to Hollywood Week on American Idol in 2018. Siva established herself in the Washington, D.C. area and is now performing, touring, and sharing her passion of music locally and around the world. She has ventured into songwriting for TV and film, performs at private corporate and wedding events, and is working on her solo album. With a magnetic, energetic, electrifying stage presence, she creates an experience that will leave people talking about the performance long after the party is over. Please help me welcome to the stage, Siva.
Before I begin, I want to tell you a little story about myself. So my name is Siva, and I immigrated to the U.S. From Kurdistan, and we came here as refugees. And when I came to America, my first best friends were all Latinos and Latinas, and I could pass, so everybody thought that I was Latina, you know? And it's ironic because my first friend ever, she was from Bolivia, and I didn't speak any English, and neither did she. So she would talk to me in Spanish, and I'd talk to her in Kurdish, and that was our life for the first year being in America. This is the typical immigrant story when you come here and you don't speak any English. So throughout my career and my life, I have just fallen in love with the culture and the music and the food. And I think my soul is Latina. I think that's what it is. My dog is a rescue from Puerto Rico. Thank you very much. So today I'm going to do a few performances of English and Spanish mixed. And this first one you're going to know from Selena. It's a little Tex-Mex mix. Is the house on? The music isn't going through. Can you hear me in the back? You know it. Yo sé que tienes un nuevo amor, sin embargo te deseo lo mejor. Sin mí no encontraste felicidad, tal vez alguien más en la cara, como la flor, con tanto amor me diste tú, sin marichito me marcho, yo sé perder, come on, para, ay, cómo me duele, ay, cómo me duele. Who knows this? You know this? Y'all are not ready for this, are you? Una flor, cuánto amor me diste tú, ese marichito marchó, yo sé perder. Come on, everybody. Ay, cómo me duele. Ay, cómo me duele. Ay, cómo me duele. Give it up for her, y'all. Y'all ready for this next one? If you know this. This is my last song until later, so y'all better get up with me. Ready? This hit got ice cold, Michelle fight for that white gold. This one for them hood girls, the Latinos, and styling, wildin', living it up in the city. Got Chuck's on with Saint Laurent, gotta kiss myself, I'm so pretty hot, I'm too high. For the police and the fireman, I'm too high. Make a dragon wanna retire, man, I'm too high. Woo! Say my name, you know who I am, I'm too high. Oh, I'm being about that money, break it down. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. 'Cause Uptown Funk gon' give it to ya. And Uptown Funk gon' give it to ya. And Uptown Funk gon' give it to ya. Wednesday night, we in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch. Woo! Hey. Don't believe me, just watch. Come on, girl. Don't believe me, just watch. 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 Hey, 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 oh, stop. Wait a minute. Fill my cup with some liquor in it. Take a sip, sign a check. Hey, Julio, get the chest. Right to Harlem, Hollywood. Come on, Jackson, Mississippi. We show up, gonna show up. Smoother than a fresh drop, skip it, don't too high. For the police and the fireman, I'm too high. Make a dragon wanna retire, man, I'm too high. Thank you. Say my name, you know who I am, I'm Siva. Been bout, don't you look away. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. 'Cause Uptown Funk gon' give it to you. And Uptown having a good time? Does it feel like a Friday night now? How you gonna go back to work? Hey, this is the perfect place for me to perform. I got energy. You want energy? Hey, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up. Repeat after me. Uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up. Hey, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up. Say dance, jump on it. If you sexy, then flaunt it. You scream, keep on it. Don't brag about it, come show me. Hey, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up. Woo! Just watch, don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe it, just watch. Hey! Thank you! Woo! I'll be back a little later, thank you.
Thank you, Siva. That was indeed electrifying. Wouldn't you agree? And Siva, I do come from Bolivia, so I was happy to hear that some of my compatriots introduced you to our one. Oh my God, Salteñas, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so now we'll catch our breath. And we will now have a panel discussion that will be moderated by Ann Agustin. Our panelists will be Mr. James Campos, Ms. Theresa Speake, and Mr. Jose Joe Antonio Garcia. Ms. Speake was appointed by President George W. Bush and confirmed by the Senate as Director of the Office of Minority Economic Impact and Diversity at the Department of Energy in August of 2001. She was the first Hispanic to ever head this office. Ms. Speake has also been involved in the area of small and minority business development since the late 70s. She founded and operated from 1991 through 1997 a nonprofit organization established to assist small and minority-owned businesses. During this period, thousands of individuals were able to achieve the American dream of business ownership. She has been recognized by both the U.S. Small Business Administration and the Department of Commerce as a minority business advocate, and by the state of California as a women business advocate. In 2003, Ms. Speake was identified by Hispanic Magazine as one of the top 100 Latinas in the country. Mr. Joe Garcia is co-chairman of Mercury, based in Miami, Florida. Most recently, Mr. Garcia served as congressman from Florida's 26th district. During his time in Congress, Representative Garcia served on the Judiciary Committee, including the Subcommittee on Immigration Policy and Border Security, and the Subcommittee on Regulatory Reform, Commercial and Antitrust Law. He was also a member of the Committee on Natural Resources and several of its subcommittees. Prior to his time in Congress, Mr. Garcia was appointed by President Obama to serve as Director of the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity at the Department of Energy. He has also served as the chairman of the Florida Public Service Commission and as an advisor to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the Federal Communications Commission. He has also served as the executive director of the Cuban American National Foundation, an advocacy group, and as the director of the Cuban Exodus Relief Fund, a refugee settlement group organization. Mr. Garcia is Cuban American and lives in South Florida. He has one daughter, Gabriela, and he is a member of the Florida Bar and holds a BA NJD from the University of Miami. Please help me welcome our panelists to the stage.
Well, what a pleasure it is to have three present and two former directors of the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity. I think cumulatively you have in excess of a decade of experience in that role, and I think Theresa, you served, as I heard from the last presentation, the longest-serving director of the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, having served 8 years. So you have a wealth of information that we hope you'll be able to share with us. To begin with, this is a two-pronged question, of course, always coming from a lawyer. Can you first describe your experience while you were here in the Department of Energy, and then secondarily, explain how you discharge your responsibility to ensure that the minority community was fully represented in the energy sector?
I'm going to start by saying I'm going to leave it to these two, who have been here a little longer than I have. I've been here just for 14 months, so Theresa, we'll start with you.
Is this thing on? What did I do when I was here, and how did I discharge those duties? Well, first of all, it was just a joy to be here. As any of you know, I'm triple energy person, so every morning I would come in and plug into the socket to make sure I had all that energy that was being developed here at the Department of Energy. But all kidding aside, I had a wonderful, wonderful experience here, but I had wonderful staff, of whom several are here. Miss Lee Avila, standing up against the wall, was my special assistant. Poli Marmolejo ran the Office of Civil Rights for me. Neil Schuldenfrei worked there. There were a couple of the other ladies in the audience. So where are you? Yes, I loved your singing, by the way. You're still just as great. Amanda, we brought Amanda in. Amanda, would you stand up, Amanda, because this is one of those things that you really want to recognize. This was a graduate, she was graduating from American University. She was in her last 6 months or 4 months or something, and we had a Hispanic event, and she was there to speak about young women and their experiences, and I was there to speak about older women and our experiences. And I was so impressed. Did you notice she's kind of tall, right? She was wearing high heels. And she was very composed. And so I said to her, Amanda, how would you like to come and intern at the Department of Energy? Just like that. I knew her from nowhere except from that presentation and her poise and her presentation. And she came and she worked and she stayed. So she is now a full-time, employee of the Department of Energy, has moved to another one of the offices. But again, those are the things that we are supposed to do as Hispanics. We're supposed to reach back. We're supposed to identify others. We're supposed to promote others. We're supposed to identify them, recognize them. And one of the things that was said today in our meeting before was, how do we do that? Well, first of all, it's all about information and how do you get it out there. If you don't get it out there, it doesn't matter how wonderful the programs or the services you have, nobody knows about them. So this outreach program is really vital. We need to be out there. We need to be connecting with the President's Initiative on Hispanic Excellence so that they can help us. We need to be with the LULACs, with all the organizations that are out there trying to reach people, that they know what we do, and then that gets spread out because we have limited resources. So that's how I did it. I did work with these organizations, and I loved every minute. Thank you.
Thank you. And Congressman Garcia?
I just want to make clear, she was here 8 years, so if we multiplied our time here, we wouldn't get clear. Look, I would obviously recognize all the folks we work with, but what really struck me, and I mentioned it to James when he first reached out, which I greatly appreciated that. When I first showed up here, Theresa was kind enough, it was a change of administration, different party. Theresa was waiting in her office, walked me through my job, told me what I was supposed to do, because someone had told me, that's your job. She gave me such a head start. And one of the things that you mentioned was historically black colleges and the Hispanic serving institutions. That is something that as soon as I met with James, I talked about. The outreach that this office has done is unique. The impact that those institutions have to the entire country and our community is not recognized enough and is key. And it's what affected me. And if I had, because unfortunately I had the bug that I was running and they were making me run, I probably would have put much more effort in that area. But it's something that I have to recognize that James put a lot of effort in, and right now in a university that's in my congressional district, he's a hero there. The DOE is a hero there for the work that he's done there. And then another issue that we worked on also is the tribal serving institutions and colleges, right? We reached out. It was an area that had been abandoned, and I have to be honest about this. One of the troubles, and I mentioned this to both James and Theresa a while back, is when we had got there, the ARA funds had just been pushed through the agency, and to some degree, you know, this was an afterthought. This part of the agency, and so in particular areas that had received not enough support. So we made a great effort to try to get them engaged with all the different branches of the DOE, which obviously are much better funded than this small shop, to make a difference for those. And one of those areas where we started sort of bringing all the disparate parts together was in the tribal serving institutions, which I think also made a big difference. And from there, I think great things have come. So that was what I gathered and what affected me particularly.
Thank you. And Director Campos, do you want
Just
to add
like
anything?
to add on, just I guess to cap it off, one of my priorities when I first was confirmed was to go out and meet the past directors, like Joe and like Theresa. I thought that was so important to understand where they came from, what they were trying to do, and some of the perhaps obstacles that they had. And I got tremendous information from both of them. I even went as far back as the founder. Well, the actual founder, Congressman Mickey Leland, was no longer with us. He passed away in a plane accident while working actually on an assignment in Africa. But I reached out to Rod Yalis, who's now a Harris County Commissioner in Houston, and talked to him about the office. And I went to the other previous directors. I haven't hit them all yet, but I'm working down a list. And by the way, we're having a 40th, because our office this year is 40 years old, and which is tremendous. In 1979 started during the oil embargo. But and we're having a celebration soon where all the former directors are going to come here together, and we're going to celebrate and talk about moving forward. But it was my thought to understand and build upon their good work and to make sure that we're doing the right thing for this office, for the Department of Energy, but for our country. As we spoke about, the need to include more minorities is critical. It's crucial for our future. And what they have done and what we're going to do and what tomorrow's going to bring for the next and future directors, we have to make sure we build a sustainable and viable office so we meet these demands and we exceed them. So it's very important. It's very important going backwards a little bit and getting that information to properly move forward. So I appreciate you both being here because it's tremendous, and your leadership and also your insight and perhaps also your, constructive criticism, if you will, because I am here for a given amount of time, but I want to make sure that I do what's right by this department, by our country. It's vital, again, as I said earlier, we have to do a better job in many areas, and we're going to, here at the department especially. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What do you see as the main challenges to increasing the participation of Hispanics in the energy sector?
Again, it's a core theme of equity and energy. It's access and interest. It's interest, number one, because when I go out and speak to many different audiences across the country, there seems to be a lack of interest in STEM and in energy in particular within STEM. It's incredible. It boggles the mind, but I sit there and I think about what is it that we have to do as a nation, as a department, to get more interest within the Hispanic community. It's, if you look at any of the different energy sectors, it's woefully low. There is not that interest. There's not a knowledge of what sort of great opportunities exist in the energy world. And that's something we have to do a better job in providing that information. And second is access. Once they have the interest, there seems to be a lack of knowledge of the access, of how to actually get into the energy world. What are the mechanisms? What's the proper way? Sometimes when you ask these groups and you say energy, they think about what? A gas station or the end product, the power company. But there's so much more than just that, especially from the roots from the beginning. So we have to plant the seed now. We have to talk to them, provide that information of access, okay? Interest and access is probably the central theme within my pillars, which is the Equity and Energy initiative, because that's the essence, interest and access.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Speake.
I really don't think I can add much, except that to build upon the fact that people don't understand energy, the Department of Energy. They don't understand the diversity in product and services that we have. They don't understand that we are in every state practically, that we have facilities, as was spoken earlier, that it's not just about the end product, but you know, a facility needs to be maintained, needs to be built, needs to be tore down. I mean, there's all levels of work and opportunity. It doesn't have to be just the technical or the STEM. So I think sometimes we need to, it's kind of like the discussion that's going on now about whether our children should get degrees in, you know, or should get some certificates in the trades. So this is a balance, I think, between what the need of the department is and what the availability of those services in the community are. So we have to access them all. We have to make sure they don't feel left out. They go, well, you know, I'm not an engineer. Oh, well, I'm not a, no, but you're a contractor. You're a builder. You're a building maintenance. You're a staff provider. There's all sorts of services that our small businesses and minority businesses and women businesses can provide.
Oh, thank you. And Congressman Garcia?
So I'm a big believer in James sort of touched upon this in the earlier meeting today, or when the welcoming. But the reality is we haven't seen more change in energy since Thomas Alva Edison connected his first client. We are about to see what those of us who are old like me saw Silicon Valley develop, and what we saw like from nothing to something in a short amount of time. I think, as a Democrat, I hate saying good things about Trump, but our president was talking about in that video. The reality is, we are looking at a revolution in energy that the United States could be a leader in, and I think it's going to create all sorts of opportunities because we're going to restructure the entire industry. And those of us who are old enough to remember central offices for phones, right? So when some of you are too young, but there used to be a box inside of an AT&T building that was my phone, and Theresa would have a box somewhere in that building, and they'd have to talk to each other. And those buildings, if you go to Soho, to the offices of Google in Soho, it's a building that's 5 stories tall, 1 block, takes a whole block in Manhattan. That was a central office because they don't exist anymore. We went from this centrally planned, centrally controlled communication system to a distributed communication system where today your cell phone has replaced 40 or 50 products they used to use. I think the same thing is going to happen with energy. We are going to become energy producers, consumers. We're going to create distinctions in it. We're going to create tremendous efficiencies in energy, and the opportunities are staggering. And to Theresa's point, it isn't about just engineers. It's if you look at the majority of solar panel installers in the country, you know, their name is Pedro, right? And the reality, it's fantastic. But when you look at retrofits, when you look at all this new technology that's coming aboard, I think the opportunities for all the country is going to be amazing. And history shows us, right? The most efficient user of energy in their time, whatever that energy is, and that is able to maximize that energy, creates power. Whether it's the Babylonians figuring out how to use water to irrigate so they don't have to, you know, be chasing their goats, they can keep them in one place, or whether it's the British using the oceans to project power around the world, but it's using the efficiency of wind energy to push their power. The same is true for our country, right? When you look at consumption in the United States, we are by far the largest consumer of energy in the world. But when you think about taking that energy consumption and making it more efficient and producing more of it, as sort of James talked about it, the future is tremendously bright. And it is particularly for those who are in the business of energy. And I think the opportunity is really for the next 20 to 40 years, because when you add to that the requirements of cleaner energy, of renewable energy, I just think that the sky's the limit.
Thank you. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to give you each 15 seconds to respond to the final question, which is, what advice do you have for the younger generation of Hispanics beginning their careers in the workforce for them to be successful?
I would say, you know, obviously reaching individuals from the K through 6 is critical. It's something that we don't do here at the Department of Energy. We focus more on the college level, but that's critical. But also telling the Hispanic community how important energy really is, how it affects us from the moment we wake up, while we're awake, and while we're sleeping, how it's everything that's around us. It's, as the Secretary has said, it's the new economy. It truly is, and it's our currency moving forward. Energy is so vital for our country's stability, the future of our, some people may not like this word, but dominance, because it's true. As long as we keep a dominant position, better off our country is. I'm very bullish again in our country, so I want us always to be in the best possible position. But securing that for the future really is securing the youth and securing Hispanic youth that are growing so rapidly. We have to do a better job at attracting them and providing them both the interest and the access.
Okay, thank you, Director Campos. Ms. Elvila Speake, your 15 seconds, which James may have taken a few seconds from you.
Well, I really think that this is really important. Each one of us needs to mentor somebody. Look at all the people here. If every one of us here took one person, that person would get into their career mode and get moving a lot easier because they're not alone.
Thank you. And Congressman Garcia.
So it's about embracing technology. It's about the reality is that we've never gotten anywhere by reducing. We've never gotten anything by stepping back. Technology has to be pushed forward to solve the problems. Whether you believe global warming or not, what we do know is that we have too many emissions. And what we do know is that we've created, in some aspects, there are more trees in America today than there were 40 years ago, because we've made investments, because we've learned from our mistakes, and human beings solve problems by taking on challenges, not by stepping back, right? The idea that we're all in the dark will somehow make America better is nonsense. What we need is more light, cheaper light, more efficient light, better light, because that light creates tremendous opportunities. You have to embrace the future and embrace the challenge.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to our esteemed panel members.
Thank you again to our distinguished panelists. And you're right, there is a tremendously bright future in the energy sector for all of us, so it's up to us to embrace it and work hard, as our next panelist will tell us his story. So it's now time for me to introduce our next panelist. Of Puerto Rican heritage, our next speaker is Mr. Raul Dani Vargas. Mr. Vargas was born and raised in New York City. Puerto Rican culture is rich in literature, art, and music, with world-renowned artists like Tito Puente, Jose Feliciano, Jennifer Lopez, Mark Anthony, and Ricky Martin, to mention a few. There are numerous individuals of Puerto Rican heritage that make countless contributions to our great nation. And Raul Dani Vargas adds to this list as a businessman, media personality, U.S. Air Force veteran, and political activist. He is the founder and president of Varcom Solutions, a DC area-based marketing and public relations firm. Mr. Vargas also held executive and leadership positions at AOL, France Telecom, Global One, and Raytheon Corporation. Mr. Vargas has proven his leadership in our community as well. He was appointed by the U.S. Congress as a commissioner of the National Museum of the American Latino Commission and is now chairman of the Friends of the National Museum of the American Latino, advocating its creation within the Smithsonian. He was appointed by the Virginia governor to the Virginia Workforce Council, selected national co-chair of the HIMSS Latino Initiative, advocating health IT in the Hispanic community, served as chairman of the Dallas Regional Chamber of Commerce, the first Hispanic to chair a Main Street chamber in the history of the state of Virginia, and presently serves on the board of directors of the Northern Virginia Chamber. He is currently working with the Department of Energy on enhanced minority internship opportunities. He often speaks to students at local school assemblies on the importance and rewards of hard work and persistence. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Raul Dani Vargas.
Mauricio. Thank you very much. I don't know if is this working? Yes. Thank you very much, Mauricio. After that introduction, I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say.
The stage is yours.
Buenas tardes. Let's try it again. Con energía. Buenas tardes. That's more like it. Thank you all so much for being here. Here during Hispanic Heritage Month in the nation's capital, here in Washington, D.C. How many of you actually live here in Washington, D.C.? Most of you, right? Did you know that Washington, D.C. is actually home to about 70 museums? Big museums, small museums, art galleries, history museums, etc. But the cream of the crop has always been the 17 national museums within the Smithsonian Institution. Included among them is a couple of the more new ones, the National Museum of the American Indian and the National Museum of African American History and Culture, one of the top visited museums in the world. Unfortunately, what you won't see is an American Latino museum. And it's a shame because Latinos have been contributing to this country for over 500 years. In fact, the United States of America would be unrecognizable today were it not for those Latino contributions. Imagine, for example, the United States of America without roughly the lower half of the country and most of the West. Well, you don't have to because Latinos have been founding and settling communities throughout the U.S. territory for over 500 years. You know, we're told in grade school that the American story begins when the British arrived to Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. Well, unfortunately, I don't think that's accurate. As far as I'm concerned, the American story begins on Columbus's second voyage to the New World in 1493 when he arrives on the shores of what is now U.S. territory in Puerto Rico. 117 years before the British get to Jamestown. So the American story of expansion doesn't go from the north to the south. It goes from the Caribbean up into Florida and on to Mississippi and Alabama and Texas, onto California, as far north as Wyoming. In fact, I tell my friends from Alabama that they're basically a bunch of Latinos several generations removed. So by the time the British get to Jamestown in 1607, there's already a bunch of Latinos saying, "Bienvenidos, what took you so long?" So imagine, for example, an American Revolutionary War where General Washington did not win the War of Independence. Well, we don't have to because Spanish General Bernardo de Galvez, governor of Cuba and the Louisiana Territory, along with over 11,000 Spanish troops who were there to help stem the advance of the British from the south, allowing General Washington to win the Revolutionary War. Imagine if our first admiral of the United States Navy during the Civil War did not utter those immortal words, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead." You don't have to. The first admiral of the United States Navy was David Farragut, or more accurately pronounced, David Farragut, whose father was a Spanish soldier who fought on behalf of the Americans in the Revolutionary War. Imagine World War II without the 500,000 Latino troops fighting and making a difference in every single theater of that war. Imagine the Korean War if we didn't have the U.S. Army's 65th Infantry Regiment, the Borinqueños of Puerto Rico, one of the most highly decorated combat units in the history of the United States Army, setting the gold standard for the bravery of a combat unit. Imagine if we didn't have young Latinas and Latinos sacrificing on our behalf in the battlefields of Afghanistan and Iraq, or the 60 Hispanic Medal of Honor recipients that we have. As an Air Force veteran myself, my friends, I'm here to tell you that Latinos take a backseat to no one in the defense of liberty. Imagine a television sitcom where there was only maybe one camera, maybe two. We don't have to because innovator Desi Arnaz in his famous show, I Love Lucy, came up with the idea of a 3-camera shot in a live studio audience. We've got Major League Baseball players going on right here in the nation's capital. Imagine Major League Baseball without the strong cadre of Latino players on virtually every team. We don't have to because the era of Latinos in baseball was ushered in by one of my own heroes, Roberto Clemente, number 21. And we really should get that number retired, shouldn't we? Who ushered in that era of Latinos in baseball in spite of the fact that he had to face discrimination because of the fact that he was both black and Latino. Imagine, my friends, the absence of Latino workers in our farms, in our factories, in our hotels, in our hospitals, in our restaurants, in our research laboratories, in our sanitation departments, and in our Supreme Court of the United States. in our music studios and in our movie sets. We don't have to, because for over 500 years we've been relying on Latinos to fight our wars and to run our businesses, to tend our fields and to mend our wounds, to patrol our streets, teach our kids, write our laws, and to share the word of God. My friends, contrary to what some might have you believe, Latinos are not a recent patch being sewn onto the tapestry of America. We are an essential foundational thread woven into the very fabric of America. That's why it's altogether fitting and proper that we are now in the efforts to create an American Latino Museum within the Smithsonian Institution right here on the National Mall. But it's not enough to remember and commemorate and celebrate those contributions. We also need to educate the public about the complexity of our community right here today. We know the numbers. We are 18% of the population. We're 60 million people, $2 trillion in purchasing power. We are Afro-Latinos, we are Asian Latinos, we are blonde-haired and blue-eyed. We are mulattos and mestizos and everything in between. You know, I did Ancestry DNA recently. I found out that I'm a genetic sancocho. I'm 50% Iberian, I'm African, I'm Native American, I'm Western European, but that's us. We're not a race, we're a culture. We're Republicans and Democrats and independents. We're a culture made up of some very foundational, basic values that we all have in common, things around family and faith and freedom and opportunity and optimism and pride and passion, and those are the qualities most in need in our country today. And finally, we also have a responsibility, a duty, to inspire future generations. We know that Latinos, the U.S. Census Bureau tells us that will make up 30% of the population by the year 2060. 30% of the population. So if we hope to remain a strong and thriving and vibrant nation, that segment of the population needs to feel acknowledged, engaged, and invested in our future. That's why it's vital that we create this museum. Because I've been involved in this project for about 12 years now. For me, it's a labor of love. For me, I have my mom looking down from heaven, a woman who was born in Puerto Rico and lived as a child, as a servant girl, never learned to read or write, never learned more than 12 words of English, lived in New York for 50 some odd years, and she was only able to say, hello, how are you, get the heck out of my way. But she raised a family. I was the first one to be able to go to college and finish a degree in my family, and we're making a difference. We're making a difference in every aspect of American society. And as far as I'm concerned, I have a vision of a young Latina born today right here in D.C. And on her 6th grade field trip, she's able to come here to D.C. and marvel at the monuments and visit Capitol Hill, and she can go to the museums, including the American Latino Museum, and she can see all of these stories that I've been talking about, and she can leave that museum proud, not only to be a Latina, but proud to be an American. Thank you all very much, and God bless you.
Mr. Vargas, or should I call you Señor Vargas? Thank you. Muchas gracias. That was incredibly inspiring. You know, I am as a Hispanic American, as a Latino, I'm a big soccer fan. Should I say I'm a big football fan, AKA soccer. And in 1994, after the US hosted the World Cup, there were a number of Latino players that helped launch the Major League Soccer. Some Bolivians, Colombians, Carlos Valderrama, Mauricio Cienfuegos from El Salvador, and now the league is thriving. So I do agree with you, Mr. Vargas. We have a lot to do, and we have contributed quite a bit to this amazing country. So that is it. That is it. I will close this now, thanking everyone for your attendance. And we have, to close it off, we have a new genre, a different genre of Mexican music, which most of us know. Please help me welcome a Mariachi Band.
We need just a few seconds of your time, if you can. That was a teaser. We have a little change in the program because of time constraints. We want to be able to get the closeout done and allow people to start having food while entertainment is going on. And so we're going to come back to you, Siva, as soon as we can close the program, and we have our wonderful Mariachi Band with us today. I want to thank all of the participants, those who are joining us live here in the Forrestal building, those who are joining us through simulcast at the different field sites across the country today. Thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about Latino and Hispanic culture, the contributions that people have made to the United States, and learning more about the fact that the Latino population is growing and will become a majority minority population in a number of years. And so we do these programs as an educational opportunity for people here at the department to learn about the different cultures, learn about diversity, learn about inclusion. I want to thank Colette Bankins, who's in the back, for coordinating this program today. Thank you, Colette. A lot of time and energy goes into establishing these programs, getting people to participate. And so thank you, Colette. I appreciate all the work that you've done to bring this program together. At this time, I want to call James Campos back. We have some certificates to give to our speakers today and our panelists. Thank you for your insights. I've worked under all three ED directors who are represented here today, and I've appreciated their approaches with the common mission of connecting minorities in the United States to the Department of Energy, and so I appreciate all of their efforts as well. So we'll go ahead and start with, if we could ask Mr. Barrales to come up. We have a certificate for you. For your outstanding support and recognition in support of this program. As the Senior VP for External Relations at Wells Fargo and Company, we appreciate the expert knowledge and contributions that you've brought to this year's program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank
I'll put
you.
that to you, and don't take a
Thank
picture.
you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
And if we could have Dani Vargas come up. Thank you for the various ways you contribute to the department, working with our internship program, and for your work in helping to see the museum come to fruition. We appreciate your efforts. We have a similarly worded certificate of appreciation for sharing your insights with us today, and thank you for sharing your time with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and ask Joe Garcia and Theresa Speake to come up together. Our past directors, to take a joint picture. Again, we appreciate you sharing your time with us today. There you go. And we need to fix this. We'll fix it right after. Thank you. And Mauricio, if you wouldn't mind coming up, thank you for serving as our Master of Ceremonies today, and for being here to represent CALDOE as well.
That's not part of my speech.
There you go. If you'll
Thank you so much.
That'll conclude our program. If you have your little red tickets, that's what they'll ask you to take to them to get food, which is being served immediately outside the auditorium. You're allowed to go out, bring food back into the auditorium and eat it here if you want. We're going to have the mariachi performance going on during that time period. So they're recommending that you exit through the left if you want to get food, and then you could circle through the food line and come back in on the right side if you'd like to do that. that. Thank you again for participating and joining us today. We appreciate you and your time. Thank you.